It's Robyn Flans with Robyn Flans Drummer Interviews, and it doesn't get more special than today because I get to interview my son, Jamie Eblen. And that's because of many things he's doing. And for one, he has been the drummer for dear EVAN HANSEN since it opened on Broadway, well, even before that. But he is the drummer for dear EVAN HANSEN, which won 6 Tonys last year. And this year it won the Grammy for Best Musical. He can also be heard on the Incredibles 2 soundtrack, which is really cool. And gosh, I mean, just recently, well, we're going to talk about it, all of it. There's so many wonderful things that he's been doing, that he's done, and I'm really very proud of the accomplishments and proud to be able to do this with my very own son.
I'm pretty proud too.
Whose lessons I paid for.
Hey.
So, Jamie, what did prepare you? Because in the last few years, you have done, among other things, these Broadway shows. And the Broadway shows are very diverse. Honeymoon in Vegas was had a lot of
Broadway
yes,
show.
the first Broadway show that you did with Jason Robert Brown was very. It had a lot of jazz nuances and big bandy kind of stuff.
Totally.
And then, I mean, Prince of Broadway, which you did last year. Last year?
Yeah.
Was Hal Prince's sort of finale. And Hal Prince, for anybody who doesn't know, was the Prince of Broadway. He was, I mean, he did Fiddler on the Roof and Cabaret and Phantom of the Opera.
Evita, West Side Story.
Okay. Yeah,
the list goes on.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. So if you think about all those shows, they are completely, crazily filled with just different dynamics and genres of music, and I mean Latin and jazz and
not just drum set too, timpani, xylophone, marimba, you name it.
So
chimes, whistles, things, rubber ducks.
So back to my original question: what prepared you for this amazing musicality of wonderfulness?
Wow, that's what did prepare me for this musicality, wonderfulness. You know, I mean, I think to be able to go from style to style, a love for many types of music is sort of kind of the base from which to jump off of. You know, it's hard when you talk to somebody and they say, oh, like I'm a jazz guy, or I just listen to like metal, or I'm just to this person. You know, a just to this person is not, I mean, they're capable, but they don't put themselves into those different styles of music. So I think that's the first thing. You know, lessons and digging into different styles of music and being familiar with, you know, where these things are coming, where they're being derived from, you know, musically, because a lot of Broadway isn't, I mean, this isn't meant to sound offensive to anyone who's like a huge Broadway person, but, you know, a lot of those styles are approximated. You know, they're coming from these composers who have dug into this music and have learned the Latin flavor and have understood, you know, German jazz or what have you. But, you know, it's still somebody's take on that music. So, you know, just, I guess I'm sort of getting away from the question, but yeah, lessons and a love for music are I guess my, you know, answers to that question.
But there was a time when you were...
I was just this guy. Yeah, I was just a jazz guy. I was just, you know, and it actually, I think we've talked about this before, I mean, definitely off camera, but on camera as well, I think. I lost a gig because I was just this guy. You know, I was just a jazz guy in high school, and I was, you know, very narrow-minded. Not not for nothing. I learned a ton about the music, and I think a good education and digging into jazz is super important for other music, and especially theater. I mean, a lot of it comes out of that jazz language too. Swing and pop music of the day and blah blah blah.
So what happened to broaden your horizons?
Well, I lost a gig, which was basically a pop rock gig on Broadway. And I was in high school, so fortunate enough to learn that lesson pretty early on in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I lost the gig because this person said I was too much of a jazz guy, or thought that I was maybe going through too much of a jazz phase that didn't fit his desires for a player in his show, in that situation. And so it kind of hit me really hard. I was like, well, shit, I could have had that gig, and I don't have that gig, and I was upset about it. So, I went through that at a pretty early age, and that sort of flipped my switch back on. I started with the rock thing, and then I got really into jazz, and then that happened with the gig, and I was like, well, I'm gonna start opening up the brain to more stuff now, and that was a pretty important moment.
And your palette has definitely expanded.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's only getting, people are like, check out this Brazilian thing, check out this, like, tabla thing, this, South Indian thing, or this, and, and I'm like, yeah, give me more of that. Like, if I had 7 lifetimes, I'd dig 1 lifetime for each thing, so.
And the Dear Evan Hansen soundtrack was pretty impressive because it did end up, well, again, it won a Grammy, but musically it sounds like very much like a rock production.
Definitely, I would call it more pop in
pop.
my head, but I think those two sort of go hand in hand.
Right.
And there's definitely some of those tracks that do lean a little more heavily on the rock, or like the kind of like earthy, organic rock side of things. But yeah, I mean, to me, it was kind of a straight up and down pop record with pretty specific parts and grooves and production. It's like, to hear the record is to hear not just the orchestrations in the band, but the full production like you hear on any major pop or rock or
Which is very unusual for a musical soundtrack.
Yeah, sometimes the band is a little buried and you're struggling to hear the band, and you're like, is there a band? Is there not a band? But on the Hansen record, Dear Evan Hansen, to be clear, not the Mbop Hansen, but on that record, the band is pretty pronounced relative to a Broadway cast album.
Yeah, and very impressive, and that's
thanks
to the production team.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Alex Lacamoire, Derek Lee. I'm forgetting others that I should mention, but those are the 2 big ones.
Yeah. So so for a young drummer in New York City, and the Broadway thing allows you to do other things, which is a cool gig.
Right. Neil Avron, forgot. He was he mastered the record.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So what does that mean? I mean, so you have the sort of the best of both worlds. What else do you get to do?
I mean, it's funny, I think, in the music business, not all the worlds do connect so literally to each other. I mean, for me, jumping into the Broadway thing sort of opened up this whole other scene that was sort of living in this like parallel, unison with the other, New York freelance music scenes. I mean, of course, you're going to meet players that jump from both, but you also meet pools of players that do kind of mostly Broadway or do mostly, freelance gigs down at, rock clubs.
You mean on the Broadway gig?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them are very well connected to other things.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, to be a freelance anything is to be well connected, but sometimes, you'll get players that do, sub mostly on Broadway shows, and that's, 80% of their income or less, and they do other stuff. And then there's some that, kind of are jumping into the Broadway thing, but still kind of, freelance and gig down at the rock clubs and the clubs in Brooklyn and wedding band stuff too. I have lots of friends that are and I was doing that before the Hansen thing came up. I was every weekend you're out there, so it's, you meet those people and I guess there are parallel unison like universes musically, but also you meet a lot of people that are jumping around and doing all of it.
So what else do you get to do?
So a few of my friends are great singer-songwriters and artists, namely the Rad Trads, who I haven't played with in a while, but they're sort of out of the Rad Trads was, birthed a lot of other kind of individual singer-songwriters. So my buddy, dear friend John Fadham, who is a drummer and a guitar player, singer-songwriter, and so I've recorded with him on a few of his records, and he's just starting to gain traction and do some of his own touring, sort of like opening up for the Rad Trads because he's in that band. So they do, solo sets and that kind of thing. So working with John, and on the other side of things, like R&B, kind of soul pop, singer named Camille Trust, and she's also just released her EP, which we didn't record on because it's all production and drum machines and sitting in a room putting it together. But we've been playing a lot together and releasing that EP. So those are the two big ones. And, again, in the Broadway thing, Jason Robert Brown, we just recorded a record last year that's coming out, I want to say June 29th, 27th or 29th. Yeah, digitally coming out.
Right.
So super psyched about
and
that.
That's called?
How We Recover and How We React. It's a little bit of a mouthful. But it's good, yeah. How We Recover and How We React, which is very of today, if you will.
Yes, he's political and cynical and interesting.
And hopeful.
And hopeful,
Yes.
yes. And
but real.
very real, that's a good word. Real.
He's a real, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you also got to go over to London this year with him and play with the BBC Orchestra. And that was...
Yeah, that was super cool. I mean, the thing for me about Jason is he kind of, in a way, combines all of those worlds for me. Yes, he's written numerous Broadway shows. I was going to try and do the number, but I don't want to misquote. So numerous Broadway shows. On the solo record, there's also plenty of songs that are just songs on their own, like a rock record or a pop record or kind of folk, jazz, it's all kind of in there for Jason. And these lush orchestrations that he's doing for this 60-piece orchestra. So there's a lot of, he in and of himself and his whole workflow is very versatile. It's all over the gamut. Yeah.
And working with the orchestra was
a highlight. I don't think I've ever worked on
a 60-piece?
60 pieces, and then, with a rhythm section up front. So there was probably like 70 people on stage, doing it. That was a highlight for me. I've worked with big orchestras, but not on a professional level like that. Back in high school, we used to do jazz band orchestra.
Yeah. But this
was,
BBC,
at the Palladium, sold out concert for the BBC, recorded, broadcast, the whole thing. It was pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I bet. And the Incredibles project.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
A lot of self-imposed pressure. I was, it was a new experience for me. So truthfully, I was pretty amped.
What was the?
Well, it's everything you hear about the studio. It's like time is money, so you're going in, you got a 3-hour session.
It was a jingle
session, so it was like these little themes for the characters in the movie. I'm not on the whole soundtrack, but there's 3 songs, they're each like a minute and a half, and those are on the soundtrack, which was a surprise to me, but I was a very welcome surprise.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a high pressure situation. Time is money. There's producers and actors and people in the booth watching you do it. You're seeing the charts for the first time. Granted, Alex Lackmore, who did the orchestrations and played piano on the session as well, sent me the charts a few days before, so I could sort of look at them and kind of wrap my head around it, know what was going on, which was super sweet. That's a luxury, in the studio. It's like, here's the chart.
People get that.
No,
luxury.
That's true. So I was obviously super appreciative of that, but I was still, amped for the thing. It was my first film credit, if you will. So I sort of blew it up out of proportion in my head and walked in pretty nervous, but it came out great. Just once you sit behind the kit, you start doing the work, the click's running, and you're in. You don't really have time to think about that. Yeah, sure, in between takes you're like, what is my life right now? But yeah, once it's recording, you're just doing it. You're in your zone.
And you've recently signed with Vic Firth.
True. Super thrilled about that. Very happy to be a part of that wonderful family. It just came from I'm using their sticks every day when I'm playing, so that was a really awesome thing that happened last year, and I'm looking forward to forging that relationship and doing some more work with them, and just it's a long game for me. It's like I never saw myself playing anything else. Or whenever you go into a store, you have that sort of like comfort thing you go to. I was always just like, yeah, the Vic sticks, great, and you play them, and so yeah, very thrilled about that.
And what other endorsements you have?
Well, I'm endorsed by my dad's company, the EPAD, Practice Pad, which is amazing. They're the best pads out there, truthfully. I know I'm his son, but hey, chill out. I'm working on a relationship with Zildjian and DW, but nothing official on the books yet. So, stay tuned.
But you've always played those. Yeah,
always, from day one.
And your heads.
Yep, Aquarian drum heads. Thanks for spoon feeding those to me.
Yeah.
But yes, Aquarian, Chris Brady over at Aquarian, mucho thanks for everything. And for, again, going back to the versatility thing, going from a Eblen Hansen thing where I'm playing kind of these, the clear, what do they call them? Oh my God, they're the clear heads, and so like more of a pop, brighter attack, and then using the modern vintage stuff and the coated heads for the Prince of Broadway stuff, which is a little more legit Broadway, kind of like borderline classical jazz. So they've provided me with pretty much everything, sounds. Colors and sounds. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so that's great.
Yeah.
And so, what would you like people to know? I mean, we've sort of talked a little bit about, people get pegged in the music world and the Broadway thing, and it's an interesting thing that, you don't want to be pegged.
No, of course
because
not. But it's, it's not particular to music. It happens in every industry. I imagine more so in the freelance world does it become a thing you start to think about, because in freelance, it's really about how people perceive you. It's not really about how you perceive yourself, which may be totally different from how people see you, which I think is kind of leading into the answer to this question. If it is even a question, it's sort of a thing that happens that you have to, I think, embrace and learn how to work with and make it work to your advantage. I've struggled with it, obviously, because when somebody says like, oh, you're a Broadway guy, or introduces you on the mic at a country gig at a bar and goes, oh, like, this is like Broadway drummer, Jamie Eblen. It's like, ha ha ha, that's funny, but also like, I'm here at this country bar doing this gig, and just making music. So it's like, sure, you call me whatever you want, whatever makes you happy. But yeah, and I think it ultimately comes from a place of respect. You guys have respect for the gig, and especially friends who kind of tease me about it are playful, it's like, oh, like Prince of Broadway here. But yeah, I think if there's any takeaway on a personal level for me, it's that, Broadway is a thing that I do. It's a wonderful community of people, just like the songwriting community on the freelance circuit, country, pop, rock, jazz. And, if somebody, I think what I said in the beginning kind of comes back now, which is that if you have a love for music, that sort of will take you to all those places. And, through your journey, if you do a lot of one thing, people start to say, oh, you're at this thing. And you're like, well, actually, and then 2 years later, you're doing a totally different thing. And you're like, I'm at that thing too. And, I think it's not so much about like fighting the label as much as it is just sort of disproving it through action and time, So like in 2 years, watch out for my world tour with Megadeth and, coming straight at you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think, on a less exaggerated level, that's sort of what's up.
Jason, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But where did you pick that name out?
I don't know. I was trying to think of something so opposite Broadway, and I think I did a pretty good job.
That was good. Yeah. But when you think of it, you're sort of playing most of everything in all of the shows that you've played.
True, yeah, there's,
So
right,
that's
hitting all sorts of styles
I
and
mean,
things.
that's the
It's true,
thing. I
yeah.
mean, it's kind of goofy when people
No, but
say,
people, you know, labels.
Broadway, what's Broadway?
Labels
I mean,
make things easier for people. They help people understand, oh, Robyn's a drum journalist, and it's like, yeah, it's true, you are, but you've also interviewed the, you know, TV, film directors, community organizers. I mean, you're a journalist.
Yeah.
You know, you're not
Right,
a drum journalist.
right.
I mean, for
Yeah.
this purpose and this show, she's a drum journalist.
right,
But you
yeah.
get what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So it helps
Right.
people. It helps people kind of categorize, and that's fine.
Right.
You know, I'd like to be that person that somebody one year says, oh, he's a Broadway guy, and then another year he's a studio guy, and then another year he's like, oh, great pop drummer. You know, and so every year they're putting me in a different category. That's fine. I'm cool with that.
And is there a thing that you're dying to do?
You know, I mean, I grew up loving John Bonham and the idea of playing for 50,000 people. So, you know, stay tuned for something on that doesn't exist yet on the horizon. But
And I know
but
you'd like to write your own stuff.
Yeah, you know, in my free time, I'm starting to get together my little home studio. So, dabbling in that and you know, learning the necessary programs of the day now. You know, running Ableton and Pro Tools and having that be a part of your drum rig, and also writing music on the side. So, you know, it's just, I think about keeping your feet in a lot of different, I don't know what the analogy is here, a lot of different...
your fingers in a lot of different pies.
Yeah, I like pie. Let's
Yeah.
go with that. Dairy-free, gluten-free pie.
And that's my boy, and
Yep.
I'm proud of him.
Why, thank you.
And I
appreciate
hope
that.
everyone will keep an eye on Jamie, and I'm happy to bring him to you, and I'm happy to be here today with Robyn Flans Drummer Interviews,
Yep.
and stay tuned for more.
Check it out.